Okay, good evening, everyone. We begin Parshas Va'era. We are going to be sharing with you some beautiful words from Reb Shalom Shvadron in part 1 of the class, and then from the Nesiv Shalom in part 2 of the class. And Reb Shalom Shvadron makes a very interesting observation. He asks, if we take a list of all the mitzvahs that are specifically related to the Exodus experience, and what I mean to say specifically, when we're dealing with Makas Bechoros, the 10th plague, which we're going to find out in this week's Parsha. How many mitzvahs specifically for what happened on that night do we have? So you'll see quite a few. For example, every year when we had a Beis Hamikdash, we brought a Korban Pesach because the Jews brought a Korban Pesach that night that they were saved. And at the same time, the firstborn were killed. And therefore we have a mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, redemption of the firstborn son. But not only do we have that mitzvah, there's another mitzvah of redeeming firstborn animals. Or not redeeming, rather, but giving them to the Kohen when we had a Beis Hamikdash. If there was a donkey that was born and you could not use that in any holy way, we'd have to redeem the donkey. We are told at the end of this week's Parsha, the mitzvah tefillin relates to Makas Bechoros. And on top of that, how many times does the Torah mentions the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus, the great miracle of us leaving Mitzrayim? Okay, well, I could understand it was a big event, and there should be a lot of mitzvahs related to that. Makes a lot of sense. However, we got to ask ourselves a question over here. Is that the end of the miracles? When they left Egypt, that was it? If anything, the miracles doubled, tripled, and quadrupled afterwards. We are told in the Haggadah, for each Makkah that was in Mitzrayim, that when we came to the Sea of Reeds, it was many times more than the Makkos of Kriyas Yam Suf. And there's no mitzvah in the Torah for that miracle, to remember the miracle of Kriyas Yam Suf. Okay, so you got to understand, Kriyas Yam Suf was a Gilui Shechina, was a revelation of God's divine presence, to the point that a maidservant at the sea saw more than Yecheskel ben Buzi, the great prophet. Every Jew said, Zeh Keli ve'anveo, this is my God and I will glorify him. They merited to sing the Shira. They came to an incredible level of emunah. And the pasuk tells us in source 3, Vayosha Hashem bayom hahu es Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim. Hashem delivered the Jews on that day from Egypt. Okay? But so it's an amazing event. And we don't do anything to recall that. Okay, so, it was much more awesome than Makas Bechoros. So that's the first question. Why are there no mitzvahs associated with the splitting of the Sea of Reeds? Okay, but then we have to ask another question. You may want to say, so why we don't ask anything? You may want to ask, but do we realize how great the Yetzias Mitzrayim itself was so great? Is that, and you think about it, really what was so great about the Yetzias Mitzrayim itself, going to Exodus, the night of Makas Bechoros, and the next one we left? What was so great about it? So you might want to say that we left servitude and they were free. Do you need anything more than that? So you might want to say, well, that was the big deal. But if you think about it, that's not so simple. And let's look at the following mashal, the following analogy. Let's say a person was sold as a servant to a very ruthless master, really bad guy who would whip the slave all the time and treat him terribly. And the servant said, I can't take it anymore. I can't live with this guy anymore. So he figures, I got to break out. So one night, when it was least expected, the servant takes a few of his beholdings, he crawls out, and he leaves without the master noticing it. And he quickly gets off of the plantation, and he gets a boat out of the country, let's say, and now he's in another land. Yeah. But you know what? He's feeling hungry. As bad as his master was, and he was terrible, he still gave him what to eat. He gave him what to drink, gave him even a lousy place, but a place to sleep. Now the guy had to run, but maybe he was a little bit prematurely happy. You know, the escape was only the beginning of a very, very long process till anything could be of better. And the servant, he's hungry, he's freezing outside, he's hurting, he's worrying day and night, and he's beginning to feel a little bit of regret for running out. At least he had a bed, at least he had food. Now he's what they call the homeless. So what was he so happy about when he ran away? Well, let's continue our fictitious story. And one day, he finds a salvation from an unexpected place. It seems that in the king's palace, they needed to hire some people, and the king was looking for a very trusted servant. And he applied for the job, and he got accepted for the job to be the king's personal servant. Wow, he certainly got a nice place to sleep at, had good meals, he had comfortable lodgings. Okay, he had to take care of the king. But the king was a benevolent king, was a nice king. So now let's think about this. If the slave would have to pick a day for the anniversary, for the day of his real freedom, which day would he pick? The day that he ran away from this mean master's house, or the day when the king hired him to be his personal servant? What would you say?
He ran out.
What?
He ran out.
The day he ran out. Why would you say that?
Because he's free.
He was free to be hungry and cold and starving.
It is his will now. Whatever he will decide, it is up to him now.
The day the king hired him.
Okay, Esther disagrees with you. And she says the day the king hired him. What do you say, Hanoch?
In general, if you say you don't want to be hired by the king or by anyone, right? You want to be a free person.
Oh, he got a job. He got a job by the king.
Oh, so then it's different.
He got a job by the king. He's working for the king.
Not a slave. Okay.
A servant of the king. The king takes care of you. Does everything you need. You see, when the guy ran away, he was free. He was free from a terrible guy, but his circumstances weren't any better. He could starve to death. Certainly, to me, and Reb Shalom, who asked the question over here, it seems that the day he finally got the good job and the real good place to be, that's the day to really celebrate. So let's take a look at the Jewish people. They were servants to Paro, chased out in the early morning, Did they have time for their bread to rise? No. Did they know where they were going?
No.
No. Did they know where their food and water is going to come from? No. And where are they going to start off? Into an awesomely scary desert. And then what happened a few days later? Paro chases after them. And he traps them at the Sea of Reeds. And now it looks like it's going to be the end of the Jewish people. But then all of a sudden, boom, the sea splits, the Egyptians get destroyed. And as we said before in source 3, Vayosha Hashem Bayomahu Es Yisro Miyad Mitzrayim, Hashem saved them. But that itself still wasn't enough. He saved them for them to meander 40 years in the desert and all the things that happened to them. And after 40 years, they finally enter into the land of Canaan, and they have to conquer the land of Canaan. And after another 14 years, they finally settle in the land of Eretz Yisrael, each man under his own fig tree, as it were. So if you think about it, leaving Egypt was only the beginning of an extremely long wandering that took 54 years till they finally lived as free people. So let's try to understand, which day should we be really celebrating as a Jewish nation? When they went into the land of Eretz Yisrael, and when they all conquered the land and they had a place to live, right? So it took so long. We should have made something about Kriyas Yamsov, entering Eretz Yisrael, but no, it's all about leaving Egypt. So that's what our questions are. Why do we celebrate the day of the Exodus from Egypt more than the splitting of the Sea of Reeds and the entrance into Eretz Yisrael? There are no mitzvahs relating to the splitting of the sea. And then there's another question we have to ask about. If the whole celebration is that we left Egypt and we left servitude, well, for a very, very, very long time, we have been living in Golus. So why do we celebrate the exodus from Egypt when we live in Golus? Let me try to give you an example about this. You know, the United States has a holiday. I don't know how much longer they're going to have this holiday.
This is the first time they're having this holiday.
Not Martin Luther King Day. I'm not talking about that.
Oh.
That's a fake holiday. The holiday, July 4th.
Oh.
July 4th, Independence Day. Why is that such a big holiday? Well, you know what happened on July 4th, 1776? They signed the Declaration of Independence.
With who?
England.
England?
No, not
America.
England, against England.
Yeah.
There were 13 colonies in America, and representatives of the 13 colonies is a little American history class. You're not going to learn it anywhere else. Certainly not from the news. And they all signed this to show their independence from Mother England. Okay. And so, and there's a lot of fanfare about that. But that was only the beginning of many years of bitter war with the English. The English tried to put them down, and they struggled, and they won. So it was a great victory. Now, but the truth is, what are they celebrating? They didn't celebrate when the wars were over. They celebrated when they declared their independence. Now, guess what? If the British would have beaten them, there would have been no holiday on July 4th. Been no holiday. So let's think about this. Let's play a little if-tery. What if the socialists take over America? And there's no more freedom of speech. And there's no more freedom at all. And we become a communist vassal to China and to Russia and all this. What day are we going to celebrate? Not July 4th.
The day that they became socialist.
The day they became socialist. So here's the question. What day do we celebrate, the Jewish people, our nationality?
They left Egypt.
It's the 15th of Nisan. That is what we call, for lack of a better term, Jewish Independence Day. Is the 15th of Nisan. Now, I don't know. How were we able to celebrate it for 1900 years without a country? With all
We're
the,
talking before we got Israel.
before we got Israel.
Yeah, but first they got Israel, right?
No, we got Israel. I understand. We lived in Israel at a temple. Very nice. We brought Korban Pesach for almost 800 years. More than 800 years. 800 and a long time.
800.
No, even more than that. Even it was about 1300 years on the land of Israel.
It was both of them.
We celebrated the Jewish Independence Day, 15th of Nisan. But what about when we were destroyed by the Romans once and for all, kicked out of Israel? Not even 10 people in Yerushalayim for years and years and years.
Still we celebrated.
So what was there to celebrate? It's like, how many WASPs would celebrate July 4th once the Muslims have taken over and the Chinese have taken over America? Right? And the truth is, you know, and what is our great Declaration of Independence, if you want to say what it is? It's the Haggadah. That's the story. So how do we understand this? Right? Why do we celebrate the exodus from Egypt when we live in Galus? This is a big
תודה,
big,
thank
big
you.
question.
יוסי, שותף פה.
A big question. Let's a lot of background static here. What? What'd you say?
My question is, now people, even though they are living in Israel, they are also shown as if they're living in Galut? Because we don't have the Beit HaMikdash.
What's your question exactly?
So even if people who are living in Israel, they're
Yes,
still living in Israel.
people are living in Israel now.
Still in Galut.
We are
because don't-
still in Galut.
Because we don't have the Beit HaMikdash.
We don't have the Beit HaMikdash,
Okay.
but at least, but some people think we're fine and dandy. Okay, let's not go there right now. Let's just stick with what we have. How can we do it? Now, one other question. What else happened on this night of the Exodus on the 15th night of Nisan? The Jewish people were instructed to put blood on their doorposts. Now, and then Hashem would look and he sees the homes that have blood on the doorposts and he skips over them. The Egyptian houses, he kills the firstborn. Now, do you think God would need a present? You know, every Rosh Hashanah will give God a present, or maybe he needs a GPS. Do you think God needs a GPS to know where there's a Jewish house? You have arrived to a Jewish home? Oh, yeah, there's blood on the doorpost. Yeah, that's a Jewish home, all right. So what's this idea that we have to put blood on the doorposts? So this is a number of questions. So let's start with the basic answer that Reb Shalom says. And I put down, I concretize it into one paragraph, point number 7. And I will expand. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so expanding on this idea. And he says, the truth is that the Jewish people are not a nation at all.
Mhm.
we are not a nation like any other nation came into being. The Jews are, instead of just a le'um, rather they are the Am Hashem. They're the nation of Hashem. And we were chosen from amongst all the creatures on the face of the earth to be servants of Hashem and his people, whose purpose is to raise Hashem's honor. And this is the true declaration of independence of our people. And the entire exodus from Egypt was only, but most importantly, as servants of Hashem. So this is not like, as we'll see now, our analogy. Our analogy said the poor man left this terrible guy's house and traveled on for who knows how long till he was fortunate to find a king to take care of him. It's not that way. Let's change it very quickly. The analogy is he went out of the bad master's house, and that night, the king took him into his palace on the same night. Let's say the king is walking by in the forest and he's hearing the servant being whipped and beaten. And the king comes right in and he strikes down the evil man and says, "How dare you hurt this poor slave? Come here, young fella. Come with me in my carriage and I will whisk you away into the palace for the shop." Now that would be the right analogy. Okay. And this is what's happening over here. That we are celebrating not the fact that we left Egypt. We're celebrating the fact, as we asked in our question, shouldn't he celebrate the day he was working for the king? And that's exactly the thing that happened. The day that Hashem took us out of Egypt was not just that, it was the day that he took us to him for a people.
He gave us the appointment letter for the job.
And when we left Egypt, at that point in time, on the very same moment, we became Avdei Hashem, servants of Hashem. Okay. And let's think about this. Okay, a whole nation, they all leave their homes, they leave their place where they're living, and they're going, and where are they going? They're going for a stroll in the desert? Did they arrange a lot of air-conditioned buses to be in Goshen with a direct trip to Eretz Yisrael? Or maybe they had big baskets of food to take with them through the desert, where there may be hotels in the desert that they could stop off. Where are they going to sleep the next night? Where's the doggy bags of food for them? Do you ever see a person leave a city to go any place? And you ever see a Jew go on a trip in a car to New York without food in the car? Assuming he's going to find something? And we have a whole nation that is going to Egypt. On what reliance? And this is what it says in source number 6. Source number 8. Before Hashem gave us the Torah, Hashem says, "Atem re'isem asher asisi l'Mitzrayim." You saw what I did to the Egyptians. Vo'eseh eschem al kanfei nishorim. And I lifted you on the wings of eagles. Ve'avo eschem elai. And I brought you to me. There were no buses. There were just eagle's wings. No tour buses. There was mud. There was a well. Okay, there weren't houses, but there were clouds of glory. Okay, there was clouds of glory at night and in the day. There was no general leading them out, no Ramatkal, but it was Hashem holech lifnechem. Hashem went before them. This was the Am Hashem, the nation of Hashem. Hashem took us under his wings. He put us in his kingly chariot, like a child nursing from the breast of a mother. And we came to our place to be with Hashem. And therefore, the date of Jewish independence Is the where we went out of Egypt? Because that's the way we went into God's lap as the nation of Hashem. And that was the great event that happened, the greatest thing that could happen, even greater than the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, greater than going into Eretz Yisrael. The thing that made us not a nation, but the Am Hashem, is that we went into Hashem's lap and received Hashem's embrace. That is what we celebrate. That connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, now, it's interesting. There is another important day that we celebrate. And what's the other day that we celebrate as Jews?
Chag HaShavuot.
Shavuot. Excellent. Excellent. We celebrate Shavuot because that's the reason why, as you see in source number 9, when Hashem says, I'm going to take you out of Egypt, last week's Parsha, the fourth expression of redemption, V'lakachtam eschem li la'am. I will take you to me as an as a nation. V'yisi lachem le'elokim, and I'll be for you as a God. V'itatem, and you'll know, ki ani Hashem Elokeichem amotzi esem mitach asivlos mitzrayim. You know that I'm the God who took you out of the burdens of Egypt. So it comes out, and Rashi says, and Ramban says, what is this fourth expression? Ramban says, B'voachem el har Sinai. When you came to Mount Sinai, v'tekablu Torah, and you received the Torah, and that's what it says, v'yisam li sigula, and you are to me as a cherished people. Okay. However, when we went into Eretz Yisrael, we did not receive it as a nation. We received it as we would call a pikadon, something to watch from Hashem. That He told us a place to stay. He didn't give this as our birthplace of our nationhood, but only on condition. If you go on the right path. And it depends. You may not end up in Eretz Yisrael forever. It would be a nice place to end it up, but you could be an Am without it. There's no holiday celebrating our entrance into Eretz Yisrael. There are mitzvahs associated when you enter Eretz Yisrael. Truma, Meiser, all kinds of mitzvahs. There's no holiday for having the land of Israel. I mean, it's a very good thing. I'm not saying not. But, you know, for example, a man and a woman get married. It's their wedding anniversary. They remember that. Do they have an anniversary for the day they moved into their first house? No. Do you know the date you moved into your house?
I know. 1st of December, my birthday.
Oh, okay. It was your birthday. Do you know what year?
2008, the year that I came into Canada.
Okay, not bad. Okay. You make a big celebration?
No.
You have a party?
Because of the birthday.
Do you have a cake? Well, because your birthday.
No, that also they do.
You celebrate the wedding anniversary. Because then the two of you became committed to each other. Maybe the engagement too. I don't know, but usually not. Usually it's the wedding anniversary, but you don't celebrate the day you bought your house, you bought your car. It's nice. It's a nice home to live in with Hashem. No problem with that. But there's no holiday for it. There's no holiday for it. The real holidays is Pesach and Shavuos. Those are the real national holidays.
What about Sukkot then?
Okay, Sukkot is another story. Is another story.
But it's reminder, right?
But in even Sukkot really is tied to Pesach and Shavuos.
Right.
It's really tied to it. It's not anything different than it. And we pick it in the fall because we did it in the springtime. People wouldn't think it was a special mitzvah. But it's really Pesach and Shavuot. That's the holiday. So that's and what are we celebrating? That we're the Am Hashem. And as we say in the Shema, at the end of the last section of the Shema, we say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim lios lachem le'elokim. I am Hashem, your Lord, who took you out of Egypt to be your God. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. I am Hashem, your God. That's the purpose why I took you out. I only took you out of Mitzrayim. I took you out. Lios lachem le'elokim. There's no such thing as an Exodus without being connected to God. So now the question is, what is therefore necessary for a Jew to be part of these people? Is to stay with them. And how do you opt out of Judaism? Very simple. You opt out by saying, I don't want Hashem to be my God. When a Jew says Hashem is not my God, he's not part of the Jewish people. Okay. If you separate yourself from Hashem being your God, you're losing your zechut of being part of the people, and you're certainly losing the zechut of Eretz Yisrael. You're no longer part of the people.
But when do you say that? You say that like, let's say if you are not doing the mitzvot.
Well, if you could even do mitzvah, say, I don't want nothing to do with God. What do we say on that Gora to the Russia? If you were there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. Because you don't want to be the Am Hashem, then you're not part of the Jewish people. It doesn't matter that you give a lot of money for Jewish causes. But if you're not interested in Hashem being your Lord, well, that's how the whole nation started. If you're not interested in that, then you're not part of the Jewish people. I mean, you technically are. You're born a Jew. You'll always be a Jew. We're not going to take that away from you. But what made us all part of the Jewish people is when we became the Am Hashem.
Acceptance.
The Am Hashem was on Pesach night. And that's when we became the Am Hashem. It fully developed 7 weeks later, much more mature people on Shavuot. And it goes hand in hand. Those 2 holidays go hand in hand. And if you're not interested in that, then you're really not interested in the Jewish nation. So that's part one. So that's why there's a lot of mitzvahs that have to do, that's what make a big deal about Makas Bechoros. Because that's when we became Hashem's people. That's why we have all these mitzvahs. And that's the holiday. That's the Independence Day. Because that's when we became connected to Hashem.
So Rabbi, I don't understand why doesn't these parashas come during Nisan, during the Pesach?
So Hanoch asks a question. Why do these parshas come why don't these parshas come in Nisan?
He's actually telling us that time, and that's the time we are leaving.
So that's a really good question. So one answer is because we got the holiday itself.
That's
The
right.
holiday itself is on that day. That is a historical fact where Hashem has put energies of freedom into the world, energies of feeling part of the Jewish people on that time. So you can ask, why are we reading the Parshas now? Really, the question should be reversed. Why are we reading the Parshas now instead of asking, why don't we read them?
That time.
So that really is what we've been talking about on Tuesday night with the Shovavim. That we are in this time of the year, especially Teves, last month, is a really bad month. Remember, it's Esav's month. There's 6 months that are Jewish months, 6 months that are non-Jewish. 6 are Yaakov's, 6 are Esav's. Right?
Yeah.
We have Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, but then Teves, Shvat, Adar is Esav's. Okay, we stole Adar away from him. On Purim, we stole it away from him. But Shvat, Teves is a really bad month. as bad as they can get. And Shvat is not such a great month either. So that's when we really need to get out. We need to get out of the clutches of Esav. We need to read these parshas of independence. We can't wait till Pesach. It's going to be too late by Pesach. We need to be connected as the Am Hashem in the middle of the winter. So we're going to make it to Pesach. That's a good question. So that deals with the first issue. The first issue is, so that's why Pesach is 15th of Nisan. We make a big deal. It is, without doubt, the most celebrated holiday of all the holidays. I know we have to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year when we had a temple, but the main one was Pesach. There's just clearly so much more to do on Pesach. Korban Pesach, Matzah, Moror. There's so many things to do because they all have to get into ourselves and resonate that freedom and that connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why there's so much involved in Pesach, getting the house ready. Everything's got to get ready. So that's the critical point. And this is what makes us the Jewish people. This connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's clear. Having the land without HaKadosh Baruch Hu is nothing. And that's what's scary when you have a lot of secular Zionists who think they can be Jews. God's people without God, it cannot be. So therefore, when Hashem, at that point that he slayed the firstborn, and we were willing to go into the desert, and we're willing to go into Hashem's lap, that is what we celebrate for Pesach. Yes?
So how many days did the plague last from the...
Which plague?
From first to the till the...
First to the last was about a year. It was about a year. Okay, so that answers most of the questions. We're still going to leave the last question. And what I want to do now is look and do a little bit inside from the Nesiva Shalom on this week's Parsha. And he brings us some incredible extra ideas. So as I said, we finished part 1. And the name of the class I called, What is the Jewish Nation? And what is a Jew? So we've answered the first part. What is the Jewish nation? It's the Am Hashem. It's not an Am Yehudi. It's not an Am Yehudi. It's an Am Hashem. And now the question is, though, that's the nation. So what is a Jew? Let's get a little bit more detail. So we know on the night of Makas Bechorot, Hashem took the Jews out. Yeah, but remember, only 20% of the Jews came out. 80%, according to the Medrash at least, died in Choshech.
So they died before the Makat.
Yes. So we'll have to see. So let's take a look. And the first paragraph is the question that I asked, why did they have to put the blood on the doorposts?
Right.
So let's read a little bit. I think it's very nice to always good to read a little bit from the Tzaddik's writings.
Then why don't we put it now?
Why don't we put it now?
Every Pesach.
Well, first of all, we don't shech the Korban Pesach.
Right, that is
We don't, I'll tell you why. Number 1, we don't shech the Korban Pesach. Number 2, even we did shech the Korban Pesach, where did we shech the Korban Pesach?
Outside.
Where? Where specifically? When we had a temple, where did you shech it? In Jerusalem. And where in Jerusalem? In the Beit HaMikdash. Did every Jew live in Jerusalem?
no.
Most of them didn't. So nobody was at home. There's no home. You were out of town. So what doorposts were there to do? The mitzvah is always to be done in the Beit HaMikdash. The fact that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash now, we don't have a Korban Pesach either.
But when they left Egypt, they were not in Jerusalem.
Yeah, they did not have...
They did the Korban Pesach. And they put the
First of
Korban-
all, it's not so simple how much, they didn't really have a house, they had tents. Tents do not have doorposts. And fascinating, for 38 years, they did not do Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim, in the desert.
Yeah,
Only the
yeah.
first year. When they left Egypt and the next year, that was it. The next Korban Pesach, when we're in Eretz Yisrael, still in their tents. Okay, then once they come to Eretz Yisrael, then they got to go to the Mishkan. So they couldn't do it over. So that's a technical answer for that. Okay, now we're going to see a very important point. And it's kind of dovetails what we've been talking about till now. He says the same idea, but he takes it in a little bit more of a direction, as you'll see. We'll do as much as we can in the next half an hour. He says, there were two parts to the Exodus experience. The actual redemption from the servitude of Egypt. And number two, and Hashem choosing the Jewish people to be his people and his heritage. There's certain aspects of the Exodus that are related to the salvation. And some of them relate to becoming the chosen people. Now, at the slaying of the firstborn, you had both halves together. Obviously, simply lahakot es bechorei Mitzrayim, to hit the firstborn Egyptians, ulahavi legulasam shel Yisrael, and to bring the redemption for the Jews. Vehein ma she'az bach Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, and that now is when Hashem chose us people, v'lakachtam lias olam anivchar, to take us as the chosen people. And this is a pasuk in Bamidbar Ches, where it says over here, source 12, Kili kol b'chor b'vnei Yisrael, talks about the mitzvah of giving a b'chor, ba'adam v'eva, b'yom ha'kosi kol b'chor b'es Yisrael, the day I killed every Egyptian, v'ikdashti osam li, and I sanctified all the firstborns to me. So you see, on that same night, Hashem kills the Egyptians and makes the Jewish people holy. They become the Am HaNivchar. Sheba'osa Shah, at that moment, Niskanu Shnei Dvarim, both things happened simultaneously. Heinakosi Kol B'chor B'Eretz Yisrael, I hit every firstborn in Egypt, V'nikdashti osam li, and I sanctified the Jews to me. Sheb'nei Yisrael Nasu Am HaNivchar, the Jewish people became the chosen people. Valzeh Nemar, and this is what it means when it says, let the blood be a sign on the doors. So now, as we asked in the question, to hit the Bechoros and to skip over the Jews, God doesn't need a sign to know who's a Jew and who's a Goy. We didn't even the other plagues. How about the other 9 plagues? How come the Jews didn't have to put something on their doors so that wild animals wouldn't go in their house? Why didn't they put something on their doors so the hail wouldn't go? The frogs wouldn't go. They didn't do anything. But this one they did. Why? Because Hashem wasn't choosing the Jewish people yet. It was too early to have to make the choice. The Jews were not ready to commit. They had been slaves for so long, they weren't prepared to become the chosen people yet. So Hashem had Adam watch 9 plagues to learn a little bit about what Hashem is. And now by the 10th, they had to make a decision. Yeah?
So then why in the 9th he killed the 80%? Because they had not made a decision. Maybe after the 9th one, they would have made a decision during the 10th one.
But did they leave the idol worshipping by that time or no? Or they
Okay, you're asking a lot of good questions. So your question is a good question. There's a technical answer to that I don't want to get into, but it's a very good question. Let's leave the answer for another time. It's a good question. I want to stay focused on this, but it is a good question. The simple answer, but you need to prove this, is that they had already rejected HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They had already rejected HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not exactly clear, according to Chazal, exactly when the 9th plague took place and when Hashem told us to prepare the Korban Pesach. It's not such a simple.
No, but the thing is, okay, if they had really rejected, so God knew. So then why did he knew that these have accepted it?
Okay,
Why
so
do you
let's,
need to
no, there's those, let's put it this way. Okay, you're asking me very good questions, Kano. I'm trying to answer this easy without having to get too bogged down.
Okay, okay.
But the answer is like this. There was two things. There were some Jews who just did not want to leave Egypt, period.
Okay, so those are the people.
That was the 80%.
Right.
There are some Jews, as we mentioned in last week's Parsha, who wanted to leave Egypt, but they did not want to have to live with Hashem.
Oh,
They said, we got to get out of Egypt, but not necessarily be with Hashem. So the ones that don't want to leave it all, the others said, listen, we just want to be Egyptians and forget it. We don't want to leave it all. So Hashem says, forget it. I'm not interested in you guys. There's others say, no, we'd like to leave Egypt, but we're not so sure we want to be with Hashem either. So let's see. It's coming up. It's coming up. Now, Ella. So now why did we need the door, the blood on the doorpost? Underlined. Ella inyan b'chirasim shel Yisrael. But rather for the Jews to be chosen as Hashem's people. Look on the next page. La'am Hashem, as the nation. Again, that same idea. The Am Hashem. They needed an inner sign. Ladas v'livchon, to know and to test. Miu Yehudi Amiti. Who is a true Jew? Haroyli shtayech lamanichar. Who can be part of the chosen people. Hashem needed a chosen people. Hashem has no problem punishing the Egyptians. No problem. They deserve it. Hashem has no problem. This is following up on last week's class, as you shall see. Hashem has no problem taking the Jews out of Egypt. But what was the problem we said in last week's class? How do you take the Jew out of Egypt? How does the Jew go out of Egypt? And that we didn't have an answer last week, if you recall, right? We were stuck. We said, okay, we now understand why they didn't go out of Egypt so fast. But now we got to figure, so what is that? We will see. But why they need the blood, as he shall show in a minute, is to show that you are a Jew.
no, like it is something like the Jew is committed, and he is brave enough to show the Egyptians that, okay, I am a Jew.
Let's see. Come on, okay. Ezu Beis Yehudi. What's going to be a Jewish home? Shabanav Ruim Lios Me'am Nivchor, that the children should be part of the chosen people. They needed Laos, they needed a sign al habatim on the homes. Not a sign on the home, but a sign for who's living in the house. And Beis Yehudi Amiti, is it a true Jewish home that I should be saved? Now, we needed two things for this. V'zeh inyan, and this is the concept of V'hoya hadam lochem laos. The blood will be a sign. Hudam Pesach v'dam Milah. The blood of the Korban Pesach and the blood of circumcision. As the Mechilta says, B'schus dam Pesach v'dam Milah nigalu mimitzrayim. In the merit of two bloods we got out of Egypt. The Korban Pesach and the blood from the Milah. As it says in Yecheskel, we say it in the Agada, Ve'ver alayich, and I passed over you, Ve'erech, and I saw you, V'hinei, itach eis tudim, was a time of love. Higia shvush and isbati laver shegalas banav. It was the time when I swore to I'm going to redeem his children. But they have any mitzvahs that they were engaged in, that they were worthy to be redeemed. As it says, Va'at arum verya, you were unclothed. The Jews were unclothed without any mitzvahs. That's what the Navi says. V'nasalam shtei mitzvahs. He gave them two mitzvahs. Dam Pesach v'dam Milah. The blood of the Korban Pesach, the blood of the circumcision. Shemalu ba'osa, they circumcised that day. Erev Pesach.
So they had not circumcised.
They had not circumcised for a year. Remember that stopped the circumcision? We mentioned that 2 weeks ago. They didn't start it again. Hashem said no Jew can bring a Korban Pesach if he's not circumcised. And nobody was circumcised. And Moshe tells them, he tells them on Rosh Chodesh, he says, get ready in 10 days. You guys got to bring a Korban Pesach. And I want you to know, for Korban Pesach, you're going to have to get circumcised. They were okay to take the sheep, but they were not in a rush to circumcise themselves. till Erev Pesach.
Wow.
So that's what it means. Misposeses, verech misposeses. You're wallowing. B'damai chayi, by your blood you will live. By your blood you will live. What's damayich? Blood? It's not blood. It's bloods. Why is it bloods? Don't you have one blood?
No, because
The answer is the blood of circumcision,
and the one of
the blood of Milah. That's what it is. V'omer, and Zechariah says, Gam es badam brisacha shalachti asirach mibor, from the blood of your covenant I sent you out of the pit of slavery. And Pirkei Rav Elazar says, for you Yisrael lochi dam bris milah v'nosim mashkov batem dam bris milah v'dam pesach. They use both bloods to smear on the doorpost, not just from the Korban Pesach.
wow, the one blood.
V'nismali rach l'Yisrael, and Hashem had mercy on the Jews. And that's what it means. I saw you wallowing in your bloods. There were two signs to be the holy people. So now the question is, why do you need both? I mean, you could say, well, technically, you can't bring a Korban Pesach and do your Bris Milah. But why do you need both? What's the 1-2 punch over here?
Both the commitment from both the sides.
And now you're going to see. Val derech ha'avoda. Derech ha'avoda means in the way of living as a Jew. Dam Pesach moira al inyan emunah. The blood of the Korban Pesach shows that the Jews had faith in Hashem. Shaba'osa alayla, on that night, Leil Pesach, the night of Pesach, nisgalsa shkocha protis al kol bais ubais lahavchim be Mitzrayim Yisrael. That on that night, Hashem revealed the specific divine providence over each Jewish home to discriminate between Egyptian and Jewish homes. And more than that, as we'll see. V'dam milah, and the blood of circumcision, moral inyan kedusha, talks about holiness, which is going to be the big topic of tomorrow night's Shovavim class. Don't miss tomorrow night's class. It's going to be rip-roaring class. It's going to talk a lot about kedusha. Shabezi korim elu, these two foundations, heim yesodei hayadus, the foundation being a Jew. Obehem pluyi hadusa shel Yehudi, all Jewish Judaism. It depends on bibihirus amuna at kam amuna shalo behira bara, to know how clear his amuna is, that he mamish believes in Hashem. To what level he's pure when it comes to sanctity. That's the sign. Mihu Yehudi be'emes. Who is a real Jew? Hashayach b'mahusal hamanivchar, who is now appropriate to be part of the chosen people. You have to have both qualities, Emunah and Kedusha. Kedusha, we talk about sanctity, we means that you don't get swallowed up by physical desires. That's the idea. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says that the mitzvah of Milah is to curb your appetite for sexuality. When the foreskin is removed, the amount of pleasure from that act is decreased. It has an impact on the overall sensuality of a person. A Kodesh person does not get turned on by all the sensual pleasures in the world. You cannot be close to Hashem if you live like a behemoth. And you have to have a moon. That's the 1-2 punch. So that's the point. So what's the sign of the blood in the houses? L'rames, to remind every Jew, ki Yehudi amiti, who's a true Jew. Shemoser nafsho v'shofech domo al yesodos elu. A Jew has to self-sacrifice and spill blood for both of these aspects. Belief in Hashem and holiness. And that's what it means. B'damayich chayi, in your bloods. You have to learn to spill blood in Emunah and spill blood in Kedusha. Okay, and that's the os of the Amanivchar. Okay, so now, as Rabbi Sholem Shadran said, that the night of Pesach is the day that the Jews came out of being slaves and now become part and go into Hashem's lap. And that's the great National Independence Day. But now we have to know how many Jews volunteered to be in the revolution. And to be the revolution, to go into God's lap, you need to have Amun in Hashem, and you have to be a person who's holy. And that's what the pasuk said again. B'zeh Omer b'yom hakosi. Okay, but b'yom hakosi kol b'chor b'eretz Yisrael hikashti osamli. The day I hit the Egyptians, I sanctified you to me. Shemakas b'choros niyam anifchar. With the makas b'choros, we became the chosen people. Now came the real separation. Mihu Yehudi umi goy. Who's a Jew and who's a goy? And that's what it says. Umeis kol b'chor be'eretz Mitzrayim. All the firstborns died in Egypt. Now he's going to explain beautifully what's the idea of a b'chor. He explains it here, and he explains it in another piece. I'm going to show you a little bit in another piece. The two together work really nice. How do we define a b'chor? This is the Rebbe's explanation. What does makas b'choros really mean by avoda? In other words, of course we know Hashem slew the firstborn, but that's what Hashem can do. What about us? So he says like this. Now think about this. All of you have some kind of b'chor, firstborn. You could have a firstborn son. Firstborn son. Firstborn son. I know you love all your children the same, but what makes the firstborn son special?
It was the first
So we'll see.
experience.
Let's put it this way. The firstborn son made you a father,
Right, I gave status change.
made you a parent,
Status change.
gave you eternity. There will always be another generation of Yehudas, another generation of Talkas, another generation of Scheinbach, another generation of Goldbergs. Okay? That's something that is special. But look what he says, Shebachor hu lashon ta'anug. It's an expression of pleasure. Umora al tanuge olam hazeh. And it kind of teaches about physical pleasures. Why? The shell of Egypt of external pleasure was the hardest shell in the world. To get ourselves freed from that. To leave the tumah. Again, we could take the Jew out of Egypt, but the longing for leaving in Egypt, that was not an easy thing to get out. We have to kill every Bechor in Egypt. Not just the Egyptian Bechor, but the Jewish Bechors. But we're not talking about Jewish children. We're talking about the things that give you pleasure. Lishbor es kol hanaos v'tanuge olam hazeh. To break all the pleasures of this world. That's the first activity that has to be done to get out of the tumah of Mitzrayim. For a Jew to say, I have a moon and Hashem and that I'm going to be holy, how can you do that when you're clinging to the tumah of Mitzrayim? Now, in another piece, he gives another beautiful aspect of explaining this idea of the makas bechoros. Let's see here. And another shmooze right after. Just do one paragraph here. Same Rebbe, same Slonim Rebbe. The redemption came from hitting the firstborn. Shinyana, as he brings on from the Alter Rebbe of Slonim, what is the most precious thing for you? What is the thing that you value more than anything else in the world? Now, for many, it's the Bechor. It's your firstborn. But it's not just limited to the firstborn. It's what do you really value? What is it that's so important to you? And you know what? That thing, it's usually a physical thing. It's so important. That's what holds you back from serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You just love sports. You just had to watch all 6 playoff games. You got to watch the Super Bowl. You got to watch the cricket championships, right? You got to be a good businessman, whatever. Everyone's got the bechor. There's something in life that you really like, and it could be much more than liking them more than your spouses. Netflix. What can you not live without? What can you not live without? That's your bechor.
Wow. Money.
Wow, that's what it means. Umeis kol bechor mi bechor paro. So the bechor from the bechor of paro hayoshev al kiso ad bechor hashiv kol bechor behema from the highest lowest. But nichlalim, what's incorporated in that? Kol tanugim, all the pleasures minel of these peoples. Sheishem chashivus. What does paro hold to be the most dear? Vada pchusim vayirudim, or the lowest person. What does he hold to be the most dear? The whole aspect of the Bechorah was within the Golus. Every Jew had something that he held was very dear and precious to him. And it came before Hashem. And the redemption came by slaying the firstborn. When I slayed the Bechor in Mitzrayim and I made you the holy people. To sanctify your greatest desires, the thing you love the most, to switch to be something for Hashem. Not just to stay away from evil, to say that Hashem, you are my Bechor. You're the one I care more than anybody else. To elevate all the pleasures, and to bring it into holiness, as the greatest. Take your greatest pleasure and give it over to Hashem. And that's the idea now of Kaddish Li Kol Bechor. It doesn't say, give me your Bechor, sanctify every Bechor. Kaddish Li is Kol Bechora. The Roman is calling Yoni Hatavos. Take every pleasure and give it up to Hashem. It's not a question of just killing the firstborn, taking it and giving it to Hashem. Not using the world as a Gashmias world, but to take the Gashmias and give it to Hashem, elevate it to Hashem, make it all scream out that's the Or Hashem that's coming from it. And we'll talk about tomorrow, and not the least of which is human sexuality, which for many is a bechor. It's the most important thing, and most marriages fail or not because of problems in sexuality. We're not telling you to give it away. We're not telling you to be a monk. We're telling you to kaddishly, make it holy. What does that mean? Show how God manifests himself there. We'll talk much more about that tomorrow. That's the point of redemption. That redemption means a Jew returns and comes back to Hashem. So there was the slaying of all the firstborns. If a Jew was not prepared to slay his firstborn, he could not leave Egypt. So therefore he says like this. If you want to be the chosen people, you have to first leave the impurity of Egypt and enter the holiness. How? You will spill your own blood for the foundations of faith and holiness. That was the first test the Jews had to pass. You want to be the chosen people? I want to see your not skin in the game, but blood in the game. I want to see your blood on your doorposts to sacrifice your blood. That I will now take that blood from the sexual organ. I said, give it to you, Hashem. I take that blood of believing Hashem, which was hard. Was it easy? The Jews were into idolatry. The sheep was the idol. They'd have to take the idol in front of the Egyptian and risk their life. The Egyptian could kill them on the spot. And there were a lot of Jews said, I don't want to take it. So the Jew is not worthy. You have to be willing to say, I believe in Hashem. I'm going to take this sheep and somehow I'm going to be able to sacrifice it, even though it's against the law. Remember the law? The Egyptian says the law is for your benefit. Be careful with those idols. That's going to keep you alive and healthy if we serve the idols. It's all kinds of idols. Nowadays, government is a big idol. Okay, and look at this. She'ein ritzona yisbarach bidvarim shebayim lo larim bidnakel. Hashem is not interested in things that come easy for you. If it comes easy for you, it ain't worth much. If you want to leave the impurity of Mitzrayim, you have to break those things that are really called a Bechor, that you want the most. And now you see all the different types of mitzvahs that relate to it. If it's your firstborn child, that you're going to sacrifice your firstborn child and make sure he goes to a good yeshiva as opposed to a good university. I'm going to slaughter what my hopes are for my son to be a wealthy, successful doctor, and I want to be a Talmud Chacham instead. Or Bechor Behema, or the Behema that represents your wealth. Tanugi and Osha Behema, the animalistic pleasures. You have to be willing to give it away. Pidyon, that's the sign you're the chosen people. Iker, hanachas ruach Hashem yisparach me'adam. Where's God get the greatest pleasure from man? Shukofes yitzro v'tiva v'rglav v'chukaso. You force your natural inclinations, what you're used to. Asher kolso neged v'tzonashu, which is against your personal desires. And one mitzvah like that is worth more than 1,000 easy ones. And that's the sign, if you're a Jew, to spill blood over that. If a Jew is not ready to spill blood, he's not worthy of being the chosen people. And he said, Yesh mishol Hashem b'chol inyanim. A Jew could serve Hashem in every aspect. Ach eino osa negativ osa, but he never goes against his nature. Es kol avodas so matim al pi tivim v'tchunos nafsho avol eino shofech dam b'avodas Hashem. He's willing to do any mitzvah that fits into what he's comfortable with, but he'll never spill a drop of blood for avodas Hashem. So this is the second part. Who is a Jew? Who is a Jew is that Hashem, this was the night. This is the Independence Day. It's when Hashem says, I want to take you into my lap, but you can only go into my lap if you have complete emunah in me and you separate yourself from mundane, narcissistic pleasures as a goal in and of itself. And that is the Pesach night. And that's the greatest night in our history. So let me end with a story of Mesiras Nefesh. This story took place before World War II in Vienna. And there was a family whose last name was Schiff. And they had a girl who was a teenage girl, a frum family, and she had an incredibly beautiful voice. But a frum girl never has a lot of opportunities to use that good voice in a very public way. So somehow people from the Viennese opera found out about this girl and they offered her a job to sing for the Viennese opera. And the parents did not want that. The parents said, we don't want a daughter who is going to work in the opera. There's so many averos in that. It's not a good job for a Jewish child. So they went to the local rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Baumgartner. He tried to convince the girl, but he wasn't able to do this.
Like she wanted to go.
She wanted to go. Couldn't dissuade her. Says, you know what? The great holy rabbi, the Kapishnitzer Rebbe. The Kapishnitzer Rebbe was visiting Vienna. Maybe you should see him. Maybe he can explain things better than I can. So the Kapishnitzer Rebbe sees the girl. The girl comes to him and he's so pleasant and sweet. He says, mein teure Tochter, why do you want this? Like, what's so exciting about to sing in the opera? She says, I want to have fame. I want to be known throughout the world for having a great voice. She's a teenager. She wants to be popular, and she has the means of making it happen. Says, you want the fame? She says, what's the real dream of a Jewish woman? What's the real dream come true of a Jewish woman? Is to have a son who will illuminate the world with Torah. Isn't that the real dream of a Jewish mother? So now, what the Kapishah Rebbe is going to say now, I would say don't practice this at home. He says, I promise you that if you give up this opera, I promise you, you will have a son like that will illuminate the Torah world. So think it over, my dear. Now, for some reason, this little event made it into the historical records, the Sefer Kehilos of Austria, this story. And somebody researched this and never found out the end. We didn't know the end of the story.
Who's the son?
So anyway, someone researched this and found out that she married. She married a person, and they had a son, and they named him Shmuel. And that Shmuel was the famous Reb Shmuel Wozner, who was the head of the Bezdin in Bnei Brak for many, many years. And indeed, he was one who would illuminate Torah. Now, this guy who did the research, he then went one day to Rav Wozner. And Rav Wozner did not know this story. His mother never told him the story with the Kapishta Rebbe.
Wow.
So somebody goes to Rav Wozner and says, you know about this story? He says, no, I never heard about it. But you know what? Now I understand what my mother told me so many times when I was little. She said, you should learn real well, little Shmulik. Learn real well. You can't imagine what I sacrificed for you. And I never knew what she was talking about. Now I know. So Rabbi Sai, it's time to be part of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael Chai, not the Jewish people, not the state of Israel. Am Yisrael Chai. We all have to make our decision what part of Am Yisrael we want to be in, and we should experience our own Geula.